some newspapers and
Yes.
that sort of.
All sorts of good stuff. Hi.
Good evening and welcome to the Monday, April 28, 2014 Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Boger,
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel,
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee,
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker,
Here.
Councilmember Plinsky,
Here.
Councilmember Freeman,
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
I believe Councilmember Lindsay is traveling today. Any members of the public that would like to address council?
Yeah.
Mike, you're it.
Mike Norris, 2241 G Street.
Please, thank you.
I've noticed the improvement on the crosswalk at 20th and E Street, and I'd like to thank everybody involved with that, council and Public Works and everyone that, and it's a big improvement from what was there before, you know. It's a lot safer now. And hopefully that sidewalk's going to come all the way and join up with the one on the south side, or south side of the tracks. Does anybody know if that's
Someday,
someday?
yeah.
Dave's more optimistic than I am. Mike, when we started that, it was $2,500 worth of concrete and it turned into 70,000?
Is that because it's a special kind of concrete? I've noticed a difference.
BNSF right away.
Oh,
You gotta
okay.
cross BNSF right away, get to the south side.
And that, yeah, I'm talking about what's actually standing there. Burlington Northern really doesn't want us to cross at that point anyway, so we didn't go down the road of spending another $75,000 to cross the railway. Unfortunately,
So people are gonna have to still walk out into the street to cross.
for that portion of the railway, yeah.
That's not good.
It's not ideal.
Okay.
But no, that project changed a couple, 3 times, depending on whether we were doing it, whether we did it a couple of different directions, so it ended up under one of our CDBG projects, and that's how we ended up finally getting it done where it is, so. But a lot of that money that we've got into it, and a lot of money that it cost for the actual project itself went into the traffic island that's there and the flashing lights and all that type of stuff actually at E Street. Believe it or not, Trevor, if you can remind me, I'm told that we no longer can put in a crosswalk across the street unless it's a controlled intersection, meaning stoplights or stop signs
That's correct.
in all directions,
On E Street?
anywhere.
Anywhere. So you got it in just in the nick of time over there?
No,
What?
we've got the flashing lights there, so it's a control.
Oh,
That's
okay,
enough of
okay.
a control
I got
for them to do it, but it certainly raised the price on it, so.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. So the railroad's saying that you can't do that there? Is that what you're telling me? You can't.
Trevor, do you know what the latest update with them was? I know the cost for us to cross 32nd Street alone was amazingly expensive.
Yeah, in reference to 32nd Street, we have to add panels and extend the panels out to the east and west, which is basically a demolition and retrofit with BNSF. So it's fairly expensive to do so. So we were able to do it on 32nd Street. We've been able to do some safe havens, like down on 6th Street, north of Dan's Top Notch. We did a safe
Yeah.
haven across there as well,
Every one of them but this one over here.
so far.
That's, you know, a direct route for everybody on the north side to get to the library and City Hall and, okay. Hopefully someday it'll get done.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else from the public that would like to address council?
We're just here to hear about pickleball.
Awesome.
I thought you were gonna play.
Okay, moving to new business, Public Works updates. Pickleball.
Having a big event this Saturday at the high school.
Pickleball festival, and it will be a festival.
Am I okay to click done?
Yeah.
Want things to disappear.
Then hit slide 1.
All right, just a quick overview in regards to the pickleball court retrofit at Upper Hathaway at 28th and I Street. Go through some existing conditions, what the retrofit will accomplish, and then get into the budget update. So we've got some extremely poor conditions on these courts. It's hard to put in a photo how bad these cracks are. You can see they go all the way across the pad, east and west, and north and south. You'll see on the next photo, there was actually a utility cut. That's why those are so unison. There were some utility cuts across the courts to do some water line improvements several years ago.
And was it already unusable at the time you did those cuts?
I wasn't here when those cuts were done, but they were repaired, but eventually it heaves up and
Then that went
makes its
back
way to the
I
surface,
see.
right. So high level, the retrofit, there's two existing courts. The proposed retrofit would accommodate 6 pickleball courts, and the red lines you see is fencing in between each court. So again, community asset, captured a few photos when they've had tournaments and just practice up there at Upper Hathaway. You see the temporary fencing, the construction fencing that's keeping the courts separated there. So the bid framework, January, solicited 5 contractors to submit their proposals. We had 1 responsive bid. That contractor is Pacific Ace LLC out of Vancouver, Washington. So the schedule, right now we're able to complete any items that are not related to the grant that's in for consideration with the Parks Foundation of Clark County. By May 20th, we will hear back from them. Our submittal is for just north of $10,000, which you'll see on the funding PowerPoint that's next. Proposed ribbon cutting July 12th and a scheduled tournament, to our understanding, the weekend of July 17th through the 19th.
Don't waste any time.
Get on
We
the
have a
roof.
liquidated damages provision in case they're behind schedule.
Yeah, we could add that into the contract. Absolutely, it's a pretty tight window.
Yeah.
So the projected costs, just south of $38,000. You appropriated $20,000 towards the project in late '23 and adopting the 2014 budget. So the shortfall is just south of $18,000. The ask through the Clark County Grant Program, Parks Foundation, is $10,108, and then some movement with the pickleball advocates with fundraising and what the tournaments could potentially do to assist to finance the project. And again, a asterisk there with shortfall could potentially be covered by salary savings in 2014 budget. So you'll see this in the packet tonight under consent agenda. Is there any questions at this point as far as the project timing, moving forward and getting it done before the tournament starts in mid to late July?
Questions for Trevor? Okay.
Was never in consideration to just start from scratch? Was too spending or what? I don't remember hearing conversation about it.
We looked at potentially going new construction route with adding courts beyond existing facilities to add pickleball courts, you know, on their own. And in looking at that, potentially leveraging park impact fees as new construction. And obviously, that had not been identified specifically in the capital facilities plan. But it did seem to get fairly expensive quickly with new construction and stormwater implications with creating impervious surface.
Stormwater.
Jennifer?
I'm just wondering why we are rushing to get this done and we're not waiting to see if we get the grant and other fundraising efforts and to make up the difference in the cost.
So staff moved forward with getting 3 bids in late 2013. At that time, it was preserving 1 tennis court and retrofitting the other court to 3 pickleball courts. And so there has been movement and interest in getting this project done over the last 18 months. So there is a sense of urgency as far as what's been scheduled for midsummer, but we have been tracking and looking at different options as far as redoing the courts since they're really unplayable at the current time.
And we want it to be ready for their tournament in July. I mean, really, that's fundamentally, that's the time frame. We're working backwards from that.
Paul?
Given, at some point you talk about tournaments being tourism, given the potential for generating overnight stays, could some of that money come from hotel motel tax?
We evaluated that, and Jennifer worked on that, and we didn't conclude that we could adequately document that yet. But in the future, potentially, costs associated with activities at this site could potentially, and I think once we have this tournament in July and some other things, Jennifer felt more comfortable that that would be supportable.
Rachel?
The grant from the Parks Foundation must have a deadline for us. Do they say when they're gonna have a conclusion?
The 20th,
Of
May.
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 They make their announcements on the 20th.
And if it's a no,
If it's a no, then we have, we can pay for it. But it would be better to have the grant.
surely, yes. So we would find that shortfall in savings of salary. Yeah, I know
Yep.
you talked about that
It's
last
been
week,
identified.
2 weeks ago.
Right. So the project can be funded. When this was appropriated by the council, that appropriation was made knowing that it was likely inadequate to do the project. You may recall the conversations. We all knew that. There was a lot of conversation about different opportunities to do different things. It was very early in that process last fall. When we were having the budget conversations, we were talking about new park impact fees. Could we swing that? Hotel motel tax revenue, would that be viable? Would that be appropriate? Grant opportunities, or otherwise leveraging the general fund to do that, depending upon what the gap is. So now that we're getting down to the wire here, the funding proposal that we have is very viable, and it doesn't require any additional appropriations in our general fund, but it takes advantage of something that was unanticipated when the budget was passed, and that is there's some salary savings, and so it's funding of opportunity, and we can use it for this if the council wants to proceed with this project.
Okay, Joe?
So let's say we don't get the grant and we find the 17,000 elsewhere. Is it possible that the pickleball, what we're calling them the advocates, would they be able to reimburse that fund down the road? Is that something that's allowable
Absolutely.
and something we would welcome, that as their tournaments progress, succeed, pay back that fund, and then let's work towards more, I guess, or something to that degree. I have to say that I am really in favor of this because of the fact that it's an activity for seniors. I used to be the sports queen, and my joints are just shot, and so I'm trusting that you guys are gonna teach me.
Yes, come Saturday.
And yeah, come Saturday we'll be there. Come summer, I'll be there too. So, I hope you consider it.
And we will always accept donations, absolutely.
Okay.
We're getting a lot of random people that walk by while we're playing, and we say every time, would you like to try? And today, a young lady, she talked for a long time, she said, I'm gonna be back.
Yeah.
And,
Paul?
so it's fun, because we welcome anybody that walks by. We say, we've got extra paddles.
Yeah, I love that.
Come on in.
So let me make sure I understand this. Total project cost, close enough for hand grenades, is $38,000. We've already appropriated 20,000. So there's 18,000 shortfall. The Parks Foundation grant of 10,000, if it came through, would mean that we're 8,000 short.
Correct.
Thank
And then
you.
there's an unknown amount of fundraising.
Right,
There's an informal pledge from an individual, assuming the grant is successful, and assume, and hopefully we'd be wrong in this assumption, that the fundraising is short of the 8,000, it comes in at 5,000. We have an informal pledge from an individual to make up the difference. I don't know to what extent that would be, but that's very generous and gracious. But the worst case scenario is that the grant falls short. I don't believe this will be the case, but we have to give you the plan B. There's no money from fundraising. Again, I don't believe that's going to be the case, but just as a worst case scenario plan B, there is adequate general funds that we can identify very specifically that can support your action to grant this contract. And so that's why it's in front of you. And this is our effort to try to meet the commitment that we made collectively when we passed the budget, try to get this project online for them this summer. We weren't sure exactly what the scope of it would be. Now we have that scope. If we wait to see the level of fundraising and or whether we get this grant or not, it is questionable whether or not we'll have it ready for them in July. So that's really the bottom line in terms of the question about why are we doing it at this time. While there's still some ambiguity about that, but we wouldn't bring it to you if we hadn't identified the funding.
And just kind of refresh my memory, I think Angelo Fields cost us $5,700 and change, which is the property tax.
I can't remember the amount.
A year.
It's the property tax.
And the Schmid ball fields, the city paid several $100,000, if I remember right. Is that right?
It's part of the ultimate development of that. So
Yeah.
We'd have to go back and look at the exact figure, but
Do you remember just kind of close enough for hand grenades, ballpark?
It was a shared
RCO
project
grants?
with RCO, shared funding through Recreation Conservation Office
Yeah,
for Schmid, but I think there was a local match
right.
for that development, design and construction, phase 1 and 2.
Do you remember ball order of magnitude, 100,000, 50,000?
I think it was, the match.
our local share.
Our local
I
piece.
would say it was probably north of 100,000, not knowing.
That's what I remembered, and so I just, to put this in context, this seems reasonable to me.
Other questions? Okay. Takes care of pickleball for the moment. I believe we do have that on consent this
It's
evening.
on consent, right?
Heartwood playground equipment. Speaking of RCO,
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
you're welcome.
We're looking for you on those courts.
Thanks, Karen.
May 3rd, 9 to 1 at the high school.
I'll be there. Take care of her, Dave.
Okay.
That's so nice. That's a great response.
So the RCO resolution, again, RCO is Recreation and Conservation Office with the state of Washington, is to set a public hearing and ultimately have a public hearing in support of our submittal for grant consideration for $120,000 in aggregate, $60,000 match from RCO to do phase 2 of Heartwood Park. And so in the illustration above, you can see the barn, which is in white, it's actually red, 49th and Eldridge, the northeast portion of town. This was an acquisition through RCO several years ago. We did the first phase within the last 12 months, which was some playground equipment that's associated with farming and tractors and some other equipment that's on site. So the second phase looks at additional equipment as well as ADA access, some hard surface out there. Most of it is crushed rock and pretty rigid trails at this point. So we're looking at doing some ADA improvements, playground improvements, and then we also have some geotech and some retaining wall work that we need to get done for full access for all community members. So that's the phase that we're looking at. That's what's really rolled into the resolution for consideration. And at a local level, the local match is identified from PIF funds, park impact fees, at this time. And this is neighborhood park number 6 and is identified in the Parks Comprehensive Plan.
Questions?
So tonight on consent is setting a hearing. That's all that's being asked for tonight.
Setting a hearing for the resolution?
Yeah,
Right. Part of the application, we're required to
yes.
hold a hearing.
Looks like we're good. Thank you, Trevor.
Thanks.
Mitch, community development annexations.
Uh-oh.
You all right?
You tried tripping me on the way up there. Good evening. Okay, I wanted to bring council up to speed on some annexation requests that we've had this year. Annexations come in once a year. There is a resolution adopted by council that outlines the time period for annexations and submittals and kind of the time frame of how we work through those. I'll spend a little bit of time on that. This is really kind of even an early first step in the annexation process here. This is the first annexation that I will be party to within the city. There were other annexations before while I was here, but they were all handled by the director at that time. So I'm learning just as much, I think, as moving through this, and there are some issues and questions that as I go through it, if there's certain individuals that maybe remember how we did it in the past, I'd be interested to hear how we worked on that. So moving forward, a little bit of background. The state law that we operate under for annexations within Washougal, because we are a code city, is 35A14, which is annexations by code cities. For all intent and purposes, there's several types of annexations that you can look at, but they typically fall into one of two categories, and that's election method or petition method. What we utilize within the city is what majority of cities use throughout the state, which is a direct petition method specifically, or it's 60% petition method, which means that those requests for annexation have to have 60% of the assessed value of the property be willing to annex into the city in order to be a sufficient application for annexation. What comes before all...
For annexation consideration.
Correct. For annexation consideration, yes. What comes before all of that is the intent to commence annexation, which is basically they're just asking us, would we, council, you, council, be willing to look at an annexation request? That has to be done, filed by property owners representing not less than 10% of the assessed value of the property for which annexation is sought. So there's a low bar when just asking the question, and then as we get into it, you'll see there's some follow-up meetings with you, with staff, to find out whether or not it's going to actually move on. So Resolution 937, which is the resolution I made mention to that has the time frames for annexation. You can see the March 1st is month. By the end of the month, annexations need to be turned in and submitted, or intent to commence annexation applications need to be submitted by that date. April 2nd, internal review of those submitted applications, and then May 3rd, sufficient intent of commence annexation petitions come back to City Council. So we're still in the internal part right now. Then you'll see in June, staff and council representatives will meet with the petitioners. This was one that I didn't see anything really at the state level or state law. It said council. I didn't know where council representatives. I didn't know if the Community Development Committee was utilized in that regard to meet with the petitioners, or if it was done on a whole with the petitioners coming in and meeting with council. So that's one of the things that I'm looking at. I'm not sure if anybody knows how we did that in the past.
Does Planning Commission have a role in this?
No.
Is there a reason for that?
It's not required by,
Required by state law.
yeah.
I would have thought they'd have been a natural for it. Okay, thank you.
Paul?
My memory is the last time we had an annexation process is that there was no Community Development Committee of Council. I don't remember what meetings took place. I remember that it was before council a handful of times in various ways. If you want to spend some time offline, I can remember what the property was and and what happened, and we may be able to pull up some information from that.
Yeah, and like I said, this resolution is obviously Washougal's resolution, and it just makes this kind of council representative, so I didn't know if that was something different than council meeting as a group of council, so. But it's one of the things I'm still looking into, but I didn't know if someone had some history, that'd be great. And a really preference of what council would like to do, if they would like the Community Development Committee to meet with petitioners and see what they have to say and then report back to council. That may be one way we can go. Instead of taking up time during a meeting or a work session multiple times with those petitioners.
So Mitch, is it your belief that the petitioners have to meet with the city?
That's exactly what it says under, actually it says in state law that the council will meet with those petitioners.
Take your word for it. Steve Carroll was in the last one, and he and Renee.
That was the only one that I remember.
He and Renee attended nothing. They had signed on and said they were fine. It was like 3 or 4 property owners. Community development did exist. It was after 2010, and we reinstituted that in 2010.
But was it, I think what Councilmember Greenlee was pointing out was whether or not there was a community development committee.
That's what I'm saying. We reinstituted all committees.
Oh,
at the start of
okay.
2010.
What's the section?
35A14. And I may be wrong on that, Sean, but I thought I remembered in researching it that there was this, and then I noted that in our own resolution, it says that staff and council will meet with the petitioners. And so if that had maybe just fallen to staff instead of, I don't know if Joanne at that time met individually with Steve and Renee or not. Or the other.
What year was Resolution 937 passed?
2006, February 2006.
Maybe we could.
35A 14 120, I think.
Okay.
I was just going to suggest that maybe we could update our process to see if the council still wants to follow it, where we've imposed upon ourselves additional steps beyond the statute.
Well, it gets and that may be. Although if you find in there where it says we meet with them, it goes on basically ending in October by our own calendar. That's when we'll forward to council for a hearing in October. This is only the first half of that resolution, and you go into the last half of it, which is probably why it wouldn't be a bad idea to update.
I have the legislative body shall set a date not later than 60 days after the filing of the request for a meeting with the initiating parties to determine whether the Code City will accept, reject, or geographically modify the proposed annexation, whether it shall require the simultaneous adoption of a proposed zoning regulation if such a proposal has been prepared and filed for the area to be annexed as provided in RCW sections, and whether it shall require the assumption of all or any portion of existing city indebtedness in the area to be annexed.
Mm-hmm.
So typically there'll be a council action along those lines.
Yeah, so, but it basically, I think it's a meeting of the full council.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which that is why that made sense to me, that it was a meeting of full council, but I didn't know if because of this,
Something further
if
in
there
the
was something that
resolution.
we did at that time. And I've been through the resolution. I don't see anything beyond really this date, these dates that were established. But I like, going to Administrator Scott's point of updating the resolution, and probably would make sense because this last part of it is all if applicable, if applicable, if applicable, and it's all related to boundary review board, which we no longer have within Clark County.
Yeah, that was caused by a different city.
Yes. And so, and it makes sense because under GMA, we fully plan, we only annex within our urban growth boundaries, and so we don't need to go through this extra process of a boundary review.
Now, I'm a little puzzled by, I think it was a prior screen, you had March. That's March of this year.
Yeah.
Do we have a 10% petition?
Do we have one?
Yeah, has one been filed?
Yeah, we'll get there.
Oh,
That's why I'm here.
okay.
All right.
Just the way I looked at it, it looked like we'd already received it.
We're there, and then,
Okay.
so back to the first, that's right where we are right now. It's
Okay.
April. We've got them, they're in for internal review. I'm actually routing to department heads for the, to find out what, kind of services we may need, whether or not it's, because some of these, we'll get into a little bit more of what wants are needed, and Councilmember Shoemaker and I had a brief conversation about that, but I'll go over that in a little bit more detail here. So far this year, we've had 6 separate petitions for annexation.
Wow.
They're all within the northwest corner of their urban growth boundary.
Big surprise.
There's 3 different zoning designations within that area that they're looking at, about a total of 150 acres. So looking at the city, like I said, they're all in the northwest corner, so we're up in that area. Zooming in a little further, that's the area that has been requested for annexation.
Are they working together collectively, or?
No, and so I'm prepared to go through them individually here as they were submitted by annexation requests, or date of annexation request. Petition, intent to commence annexation, sorry. The first is McKeever property. We're just off of Crown Road, McKeever, and I think it's 30th Circle. Again, the 2 north properties were the former school-owned property, and the city of Camas had that. And then the property to the south is another private property owner.
What are those east-west streets?
That's what I was saying. This, they updated.
Right here?
Okay,
McKay, it's the name.
hang on, sorry.
Oh.
There we
Okay.
go. Now I can do it. This is McKeever. This is the road that runs right through here. I believe this
What do you
is
want?
30th. That comes right down here. Crown Road.
And 30th.
Is that Crown Road on the left?
This is Crown Road, yes.
So how far up past Bridge and those other?
Just passed.
Just past, yeah.
Just passed.
This property is zoned R110, excuse me, I don't like how they have updated this now, because now I gotta turn this on. And R175, so the property north of McKeever is zoned R110, the property on the south is actually zoned R175. The 2 properties to the north are owned by the same property owner, and then the one to the south is a third, but they came in under one petition.
And the individual in between has not petitioned.
Has not petitioned. That's about almost a 3-acre piece of property there,
The one that's
right on
not
that
circled.
little corner, yeah. Yeah, the interesting thing about this one too is that the 2 properties that were owned by the school district have a comprehensive plan designation of public facility because they were intended to be school. That's another thing that we will have to change once annexation occurs, because, I mean, I'm looking at it during the 2016 process with the county. That's when we can change those comp plan designations. But once we annex it, then we can look at changing that as well.
Does the school district own them now?
No, privately owned.
We don't have to wait for the annual review window then?
Once it's annexed, no.
Okay.
Total of those properties altogether, they're in red, 20 acres, just over 20 acres. There's 1 house on the south portion of property, and then the 2 properties that to the above are there's some agricultural buildings on.
Now, we more or less have to include the parcel that's not petitioning in this, don't we?
Well, that's one of the things about when we meet with, however that comes about, with the petitioners, is that we can modify, you can modify the petition request to make a different boundary, make it more consistent, however you.
Aren't there, because the area to the west is Camas, right?
Correct.
Is there any issue with an island, unincorporated island?
We actually have it in multiple places, and actually that parcel, that portion that is right to the west, I think is still in the county.
Okay.
Yeah,
But to answer your question, yes, there's issues with islands.
there are,
So these are in the county currently, but they want to come into Washougal.
right, they're in our urban growth boundary, which is the area that we can look to annex.
Why do they want to do that?
This one particular, development. They want to develop this property. They are developers and they want to do a subdivision.
And residential is what they want to do?
Yes.
Like how small of lots could go on there?
R175.
Yeah. 7,500 square foot lots, R110. They did a PUD. You look about 8,000 square foot lots or 6,000 square foot lots.
This is contiguous to the Woodburn Hill sub-area.
It
Would
is.
it automatically
No.
be incorporated within that?
It would not.
No. Okay.
Steve?
In the lower right, that's already Washougal, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And up on the right side of that, of the two upper properties, is that county or is that Washougal?
County.
It's county. All these properties are county.
Everything north of Lookout Ridge is county.
Okay, thank you.
Is it higher in elevation than Lookout Ridge? Does it keep going up
It
there?
keeps moving up, yeah, yeah.
That's where
Then it
crowns.
goes down.
Yeah. The gas annexation, just a little bit, you can see where we were. Here's the McKeever properties that we were just talking about, so gas is right there. This one's zoned R110. It's 5 acres, and it currently has a single-family residence on it, and it's under single ownership as well. Cheney annexation, just a couple of parcels east. Again, just over 5 acres. It's zoned R110, just over 5 acres. It is vacant. It's a vacant piece of property under single ownership. The DeBoever annexation is the largest. It's goes all the way up to 23rd. It's zoned R1-10 and employment center. It's got 100 acres in it total. There's one house on the property, which is on this portion of property, this parcel right here.
What do they want?
And it's in a family trust.
What are do you have any idea what their plans are for it?
Well, in their petition, they basically say, obviously, they want to develop it at some point in the future. When I spoke to one half of the trust, initially they were probably looking another year before they would come in for development, but then they decided to bring it in this year. Their ultimate concern, they have safety concerns. They want protection for police and fire with a closer response times than what the county is able to provide them. They have had some issues with some vandalism. They believe that there's drug activity near the CPU station up there, and every time that they always call 911, but it's quite a long time before they get a response. So that, obviously they say development, but that's one of their initial.
What kind of development?
They would be, they didn't talk about the employment center. And the employment center, I need to back up, because while we designate employment center, we don't have regulations yet for employment center. I think I shared that with the Community Development Committee, that's one of the things that if we look at bringing this forward, we have the time at least within our current annexation policies in order to bring, we have draft of employment center designations that we could bring forward through planning commission and have adopted, so to occur prior to annexation occurring. But, so that would be, definitely be something if we, excuse me, if you, council, decide to move that forward, I would move the employment center regulations through planning commission for your approval before that would.
So they aren't talking about rezone to residential?
No, they have not talked about that at all.
This is in the northeast?
It's in the northwest. All these are in the
What
northwest.
is that body of water?
It's a lake.
Yeah, it's.
Which lake?
Hart.
I can, let me go back, I may be able to.
It's one that everybody always forgets is even,
Price
that even
Reservoir?
exists.
Price
Well,
Reservoir.
that's my problem, right there.
Price
You
Reservoir.
can't actually see it from the roadway. You can only see it if you're on the DeBouvers driveway or the areas coming into these.
There you go,
lots
right
up
there.
There you go.
Everything that Mitch is talking about is up in this area.
Okay, where's 32nd Street on there? Oh, I see where it is.
We're way
Yeah.
over there.
Okay,
This is Crown.
yeah.
So this DeBouver is over, where's Crown Road on that map? Oh, I mean on the screen up top.
It's not,
Well,
It's not.
the parcel
Yeah.
that, sorry, Rose,
Gotta go back.
the parcel that we're talking about right here, highlighted is right here on this map.
Oh.
So Crown is all the way over here.
Yeah. Oh, the overall.
When I get through, yeah, there's an overall,
Gotcha.
that I showed originally, but, I'll zoom back out, when we get through here.
That's before I was up and running.
So again, that is a total of 100 acres. There is one house on that, and all those properties are within the family trust.
What's the designation on the other side of, in Camas, the property?
There's parks, I know that, but I don't know what and then it'd probably be school, I don't know. Are you saying to the north?
No, to the west.
I don't know that off the top of my head. I can
There's
find
the
that out.
new elementary school
Woodburn.
is
Woodburn
Woodburn Elementary, probably on residentially zoned property, and there's a subdivision that's been cut in or is almost
So
done.
it's
Done.
residential?
Yeah.
Residential.
Or pub, or school?
School as
Yeah,
well,
or
yeah.
park.
as long
And
as
then
you're
there's
going to
park.
the west or to the north. If you're going to the south, it's all county park.
Yeah,
It's all Round
Yeah.
Lake.
parks.
Round
yeah.
Lake.
Right.
The Zimmer annexation, socked in right there. Zimmer is one party of the DeBouver family trust. And so this is their property, contiguous with the DeBouver property that they're looking for, they've made an intent to petition for annexation. Again, these properties, all zoned R110. There's a section line, I think, is the only reason that weird line's in the, kind of segregates the property off to the, although they are separate tax lots, but I think it's just, there may be a district boundary there, or some that I'm not aware of. 9 acres total on those, and there's one house, several agricultural buildings on those properties.
How many?
And that's under single ownership. Now, moving back, remember I went through these all chronologically as they came in, so I'm moving back now. That's why I gave you the big picture first, and then I
Thank
zoomed
you,
in, and then we'll
Mitch.
go back out. But the Stryker annexation request, again, between the Gast and the Cheney properties, again, zoned R110. It's a 5 acre, just over 5 acres, and is a house, and it's under single ownership,
What does SFR stand for?
single family residence.
Of course it does.
That would have ran all over the map, so I just said
Yes.
that's that far. After the petition, after March 31st, there was a request made by I'm calling it Whitaker Carson request. It's the property just north of the McKeever requested annexation. There was some discussion with the McKeever folks that they may want to bring that one in as well, again for development, almost immediate development. And but I did get an email from Whitaker and Carson that their husband and wife that they would like to make that request. So because it was after the time period to submit annexation, I said that that would be the will of the council whether or not to modify. They're going to be looking at modifying that boundary but that I would make it, make council you aware that they are willing and would like to come in as part of this process. So the particulars on that, again, it's zoned R110. There's 5.5 acres on that piece of property, and it's got a single-family residence on it, and there's one owner. So, we'll get back to the map here. All the annexations here.
Not counting the Whitaker one.
Yeah, well, that one, I put as all annexations plus the request.
There you go.
That's quite a chunk.
Yeah, so that, not counting that, so this total would be about 155 acres, just over 155 acres total, coming in.
Mitch, just real quick, could you, for the council, just use that little
That's what-
magic button
zoning?
to show the zoning?
That's,
I'm sorry.
that's all right.
Just keep getting ahead
So-
of you and you're all over it.
That's
Do
all
they
right.
have the option to go to Camas and ask for annexation?
No.
They have to
No.
come into Washougal.
This is our urban growth boundary.
It's, oh, yeah, yeah. It's all
Um,
new to me, first time I should say.
So the zoning designation runs right through here, right along these lines. And the north half is employment center, and then the south is R110, except for down here, which is R175.
Just so I'm clear, R110, that's Clark County zoning, not ours.
It's ours as well. Yeah, we have an R.
We have one.
We
but
have one.
It's presently zoned by Clark County.
Well, no. Presently zoned, all these properties have urban holding on them. There's a designation of urban holding, so they cannot further divide until they are annexed into the city of Washougal.
Thank you.
Thanks. Could you remind me again what the R110 means?
Single-family residential, 10,000 square foot lot minimum.
Okay,
R175, one home per 7,500 square feet.
okay.
And again, and I would imagine that the McKeever would take advantage of, do PUDs, do planning development, and get 80% of that. So, an 8,000 square foot lot, or a 6,000 square foot lot in the R175, so you can go smaller lots. When I've had some discussion with the other developments, Cheney and Stryker in particular, they were looking probably at larger pieces, just being able to divide, not necessarily maybe to full urban development at this time, but wanting to divide for family, or Stryker was more looking at larger lot development.
Do we have,
We do not have maximum density requirement, or minimum density requirements, yes, we do not have that.
Why not?
Explain that a little further.
Well,
Minimum density.
we have your minimum or your maximum density in the R1, 1 unit per 10,000 square feet. You could have a minimum density requirement saying that you can't create lots larger than, say, 15,000 square feet. So you have to create small lots. The county has that. I think Vancouver has some of that, but we never have. And
Doesn't that
every
create some
develop
GMA issues?
it can. Although I think if you look at what's been developed within Washougal, it's never been an issue. We get majority of all developments we've had have been PUDs. I mean, they go even smaller than the zoning has
So we're
allowed.
kind of complying with.
We're complying with it, just functionally complying with it, yeah. And we've never been taken to task on it either, but
Growth management, GMA.
They wouldn't. If you're increasing your density, they wouldn't care.
yeah. We make
Encourage
provisions for allowing, the density increases through PUD, so that's how we kind of answer that question then.
Does this suggest to you that people are starting to build again?
Oh, we know that.
Yeah, we know that.
Throughout the city it is.
Yeah, our permits are up quite a bit. That's not an issue. I think that, I definitely feel that we're moving off of the bottom of that, and
But my understanding so far was that the permits were for single-family residences or buildings, and this is a development.
It is. That'll turn into single-family permits.
Yeah,
we actually got our first subdivision
This is a
in
whole
last
subdivision,
week
yeah.
within the city limits.
This will be
So
another one.
I mean,
How long?
what has it been, 6 years at
been a
least,
long
probably,
time.
yeah, that we've got a subdivision. So we just got our first one back in. Came in last week. Not, I mean, it's 12 lots, but it's not that big of a development, you know, or area.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
So, Paul,
You're probably going to get there, but anytime we talk about annexations and development, I want to know what infrastructure is there and what are we going to have to do?
Yeah, and see, and that's part of it. That's why I said that this presentation is really early, pre. I'll be back next month with the actual certified, petitions, intent to commence annexation petitions, and I'll be armed with comments from all the other departments about what we have, what we can do, and water and sewer, particularly come into question. This is an area that, from a fire standpoint, it's currently East County.
have we notified them?
We haven't yet. That will happen once we say, yes, you can move forward. We tell the petitioners that they can move forward with their petition for annexation.
Let's send it to them tomorrow, no matter what. Go ahead and send them your presentation tonight, just so that they're aware that the discussions are happening.
Absolutely.
That's one of their gripes.
Okay.
And we're also impacting Camus's service on fire, because this would be served by,
Yeah,
presumably by
and that,
Camus.
yeah,
That's another
and
discussion.
again, those are all, that's why the petitions get routed to
All the departments.
the departments, so that then I get back what it is that part I do remember from before, because I was the one that was commenting on the petitions as they came back.
That's Woodburn, I'm sorry.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we presently have water at a sufficient elevation to serve that area.
There is, we've had some initial discussions with, when the McKeever property was looking at annexation, they approached Public Works and city engineer about that, and there was some conversations with our water department about the ability to serve. They've got a general, yes, we can do it. Whether the question was really whether or not how that was going to go about, whether they could get adequate, have the physical connection of property. Because if I go back, I'm sorry to go back through this, but let me go. Am I taking too much time?
You're okay.
In looking at the McKeever property here, so this is the property that they came to us, and asked the Public Works about. You'll see that, I mean, we have services that come up right to here. It's right here, but there's about a 30-foot, about as big as that dot that I'm holding there, that they can't get across, or they couldn't. Although now these people have requested to come in. So if they come in, they would have to obtain easement from them. We told them that all before. If they didn't come in, how are you going to get services there? Those are questions that they would have to answer and show us how they're going to maneuver it from there.
Couldn't you come in from Coda Ridge as well? Bottom center,
This one?
just below it on the street level.
Yeah, this is an intervening property, which is not in Coda Ridge, and it's just sitting out there.
But come down, there's your condos.
Yeah, they could go this way, I guess, if that's what you're saying, yeah, and come up.
So if I understand what you're telling me is that the water department says they could do it, but right now the infrastructure is not in place.
No, it's there. One of the things that they were talking about was that would they have and Sean, I have to go back, because when we initially talked, this property was not in the mix at the time. We were only looking at these two pieces. And so that's why we were saying, well, you'll need to get something over here. So I don't know about this here. I'm assuming that's probably correct, that they probably could get there, but that wasn't, at least, and I wasn't involved in that discussion with Public Works. Again, that's why we route these around, and then we get everybody to look at them and comment back to us, and we come back to you.
So let's go back to your the overall map. So council has some latitude if the county commissioners also agree on bringing in the islands like the one that's right there on Crown Road.
Yeah, it's not necessarily, it's not a question for the county. I mean, this is in our urban growth boundary. This is up to city council whether or not we can serve it, and we feel that we have the ability to serve, we can annex that property. There's not a boundary review board that goes back to the county as a subset. We've planned for it, that's why we have.
So the county commissioners don't have a say in it whatsoever? Awesome. Okay, so, the islands are simple.
Go back and erase that.
The islands are a simple question. Have you done an assessment yet on what the assessed valuation is of all of your area in
No.
red?
Nope.
Okay. When you get to that point, would you also, for council and administration, would you also do an assessment of those areas that are outside of it going up to 23rd as well?
In here?
Yep.
And just so you know, I have.
That doesn't have to equal any of the 60% though. The 60% only comes back to the areas that are asking to annex in.
No, it is when you, if you redefine the boundary, it's 60% of that area that is coming in. That's where you get into this issue of if these properties are, you know, if they're more than the 60% and they're saying no, but you want them,
You have
then,
no choice.
then we're done.
You were thinking exactly as I was thinking, Mr. Mayor.
I actually am meeting with this gentleman Wednesday about, I don't know.
So do you have the ability, and does council have the ability, you administratively or council, to break the March 31st rule?
Well, there's nothing in state statute that says there has to be a time frame, and so I was only operating on what the resolution that is currently in place for annexation, and that's when we send out notice for annexations, and that they have to be submitted by March 31st. But the way I look at it, it's a self-imposed time frame that you have.
And also, we could change the boundary of the requested annexation to include the one that came in late,
Yes,
without changing our procedure.
correct. I mean, you could change the boundary without changing our procedure. There's, I mean, the procedures are in place right now. I'm operating on those timelines that have outlined in that resolution. If we want to delay it, great. If we want to speed it up, great. I mean, I need to do, obviously I want feedback from the departments about how we can serve it, because I think that's the best.
Can you do that, or do you need something from the council
As far as,
changing it to allow that late annexation?
I think that's part of this process.
Yeah. Right.
This is I mean, like I said, this is the first step. I just wanted to give everybody a heads up, because we've never been through this, including myself, that this is it, and we've got 6 of them that have filed. And I'll be back next month with all the data about what other departments feel and how we can provide service to these areas.
But the people that are at the moment excluded, they need to know fairly early that they can be included.
Yeah, I don't know how we would necessarily go about that.
well,
Once the annexations are filed, we post and everything else, but state law makes provisions for you to modify that boundary as you see fit within the urban road boundary.
And that was why I asked, does the mayor need anything from us? Because if he does, I suggest we put it on the agenda tonight as a walk-on item and do it,
doesn't sound like we do.
Not at that point.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
okay?
But thank you for that.
We'll keep you guys moving.
Hi, Joe.
So,
So these are Camas School District.
correct.
Okay.
So I have next steps. Internal routing of comments, formal presentation of annexation petitions. Again, this was informal. Formal will be next month with all those comments. Staff and council meetings with petitioners. It sounds like, at least initially, that we want to do that in the whole.
So is that something where they come here?
Uh-huh. And I'll research that whether or not they have to be here, but
Are they represented by council or any of them?
are they what?
Represented by a lawyer?
None that if they do, I haven't talked to them. Again, if we're gonna move forward with that, and we're gonna bring those in, we need to develop and to me, that's probably a bigger issue, because I want that in, would want the employment center regulations in before we annex properties. And then back to city council in October to set the hearings.
How long will it take you to get employment center
I
regulations?
could have it back before we get back here in October.
What kind of things does that include?
Off the top of my head, it was, I mean, we really did it as a placeholder when we were looking at employment center. There's a lot of history there, but it was really more on the east side of town that when we were having those discussions of employment center. But the vision is, you know, not heavy industrial, not really light industrial, more business park type thing, high tech campuses type thing is what we were looking at.
Good.
And then I'm done. So I'll send it to East County and let them know that, is that Scott still? Okay, we'll do.
So what's interesting is that if you look at our map up here, we really have two significant areas of our urban growth boundary that we talk about. The northwest one, there's some in the middle there. Forget about that for the moment, and then the big chunk to the northeast. These 6 petitions represent almost, it was about 2/3 to 3/4 of that northwest chunk, all at one time. And we've talked about how these areas are out in the future. We expected that the residential would come sooner potentially than the employment center, because it makes sense in the residential growth once that curve picked up again, which it has, and it's contiguous. There's roads that are stubbed out. People are going to come and want to do subdivisions in there. We were kind of expecting that. What will be very interesting is what they have in mind, if anything at this point. It could just be because they own it and part of it's residential, they're going to bring it in, but the employment center piece. But this is very exciting news that we have the property owners out in our UGB that we've been planning for. All our facilities plans envision this coming in, and here they come.
Do we have, sorry, go ahead. Do we have any idea? I know we had that one parcel that was getting close, would be basically an island there on the edge. And we have some other parcels that if we did go all the way up to, what's the street up there at the top?
23rd?
All the way up to 23rd. And if we,
So that island?
you know, if we expanded it to that whole area, do you have any idea what the attitude of the property owners in the area, you know, or non-petitioning property owners,
In here?
what their attitude would be about being annexed?
In this part?
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm meeting with this property owner. It's either tomorrow or I think it's Wednesday. So I'll get a better feel. That's a pretty good sized chunk there. The rest I don't know. At one point back in 07, 06, all of these properties wanted to come in, and they were seeking to come in. And then recession happened, so,
Okay.
yeah.
We hopefully will know sooner than later. Mitch will have an email waiting for him in the morning, asking him to contact all of those other property owners to see what their thoughts might be. Paul?
One thing that would be really interesting is, what's the county plan for transportation up there? Do we have, I go to RTC meetings, but I don't remember seeing any kind of county plan for roads. I've heard rumors that there's a plan for an east-west arterial running north of Lacamas Lake. That's quite a ways north of that property. But beyond that, it would just be interesting to know if the county transportation plan includes anything up there.
I don't know of anything off the top of my head short of, I think if you're thinking in terms of new road systems or whatnot, I don't know when of anything that's on the books. I know that when we were looking in 07, when we were looking at urban growth boundary expansion, when we were taking in a much larger portion in the middle there, we were looking for, and we were putting on in our capital facility plan for our long range plan, of crossing the Washougal at north, quite a bit north up there.
Right.
With a bridge. We had actually at that time asked the county to put it on their arterial atlas so that they could start, looking and planning for it, but they didn't. So that's about all I know of,
Okay.
and short of. But I can definitely look into it and see if there's anything else
That'd be great.
But I don't know of anything off the top of my head.
Other questions for Mitch? So Trevor, when this gets to your departments, in regards to water and sewer specifically, so there's going to be potentially some healthy investments up there for these properties to come online?
Yes, specifically for water, you can't tell from the elevation, but there's a couple.
There's actually a good one on that map.
Yeah, I was just looking at that, but there's some peak gobs, if you will, right in this area, and right in here, that's really over the DeBoover property, and we were looking at potentially siting a reservoir and working in partnership, because they've also got BPA across that property,
Right.
by understanding the tall towers.
Yep.
So, we've spoken to them previously, and that was pre-recession, which Mitch just referenced in '06 and '07. So, able to serve utilities, but there could be some capital investment to get to that. Also on the transportation circulation, the Woodburn Hill sub-area, ultimate build-out of Woodburn anticipated making its way all the way to 23rd for circulation, because right now, the ingress-egress is Lookout Ridge Drive.
Right.
So everybody that occupies those lots in Lookout Ridge and Coda, and even getting across to Granite, unless you use LeBrun off Shepherd. So the Woodburn Hill sub-area plan anticipated that for circulation, that comes in and the transportation grid is enhanced.
There was actually now I'm drawing a blank on the name of the subdivision, but Economides was the name of the subdivision, but it developed, it has preliminary approval for, right now, 9 lots. on
9
this
homes.
piece. And it, all their access come down from this.
Right,
off
on the DeBoover's driveway.
Yep. So I mean, it is definitely, from a circulation standpoint.
When that comes forward, Trevor, would you make sure that at a staff level, you look at all the options that we have in regard to developers putting in the entire systems and utilizing latecomers fees so that
Yes, yeah.
the hit
Also-
to our system is financially is as low as it can be for those that want to develop sooner than later?
Yeah, most of those facilities are identified in the facility plan, as far as siting, as far as lift stations for low areas to be able to lift sanitary sewer and water, obviously, for the premium elevation. So that'll be taken into consideration, annexation by annexation, to see what the specific facility or improvements would be needed to fully serve it.
So Mitch, let's chat tomorrow about some of those other lots and include the CPU on their substation as well, and make sure that they've got a request.
The only other thing, I guess, along those lines, Sean, is that within the resolution that we do have is, we do note that council may require the petitioners to enter into a development agreement to provide for infrastructure and/or level of service standards for the area proposed for annexation.
Yeah, I know about that.
Yeah, so.
Yep.
This is almost a blank whiteboard, not quite, but almost a blank whiteboard. So as we work in partnership with these property owners, we have a great opportunity to do something coordinated and economical, efficient. It's gonna be good stuff.
Gonna have to find a house to move your department into.
That's right, I'm losing one in summer.
Any other questions for Mitch? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
David, strategic planning.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, I don't have a presentation, just a verbal report. As you'll recall, in the 2014 budget, you appropriated $18,000 for strategic planning initiatives, and at your planning session, we talked about 3 options that we were presenting as an administration for where you might invest those, and you asked for more information, particularly about 2 of those options. And the three that we presented were some additional work on our website, just to keep doing more stuff with that, but we were also doing the tourism website. That didn't get as much interest from you. And then the other two that did get more interest were community survey, and then also assisting with our efforts in the downtown, whatever that might be. There was nothing really specific about that. As you know, recently we chatted about the Transportation Benefit District again because you had asked for information about that, and in the context of that conversation recently, the council again brought up the issue of the community survey. So where we're at on that, in following up on your informal direction, is been kicking the tires with some service providers around a community survey and about the timing. And so what we are preparing to do, based on your feedback here in a few moments, is to prepare a professional services agreement with a selected service provider to engage a community survey here in short order in this late spring and summer to inform the council on the TBD, the levy lid lift, and then just all of the parameters that you engage when you do a community survey to help us in the budgeting process. So out of that $18,000, we are sort of targeting $13,000. It might be a little more than that, depending upon what we would get. There's certain components, we want it to be very meaningful for everybody, so we want to make sure we get what we're looking at, and then the remainder of it to use in assisting a grassroots effort that's happening in the downtown in coordination with some of our hotel motel potentially. Very preliminary conversations that the mayor's had with that group. So that's it in a nutshell. We're preparing those.
Sorry.
I want to make sure you don't just go out and ask, what can we do for you? Because we don't have a lot of money to do things. What I would like to focus on is, what are your priorities?
Absolutely.
And in addition to that, if you want to ask, what additional services do you need? And are you willing to support these with a levy lid lift? Fine.
Right.
But I think when you put out a survey like this, you have to be careful of creating expectations that you can't meet. And the other thing is that if you're going to offer additional services, you need to tell them where the revenue is going to come from.
Right.
The license tax and the levy lid lift and all that sort of thing.
Right.
And I would be interested in seeing the feedback on that, because so far the feedback I've gotten begins and ends with four-letter words.
It's
Are we talking about, as far as part one, the survey aspect, are we just talking about doing a poll, basically? Random sample, questions, or are we going to try to survey everybody?
No, this would be a random sample of voters in the community. Typically, you try to get voters, but it really is a random sample of households. It would be of a sufficient sample size so that the results of the survey would be statistically significant, and so that you could make scientific conclusions, as far as survey research goes, about what the perceptions and the priorities and potentially the desire of the community around any number of questions.
Who's going to write the questions?
So that was the next part that I was going to get into. There are a number of service providers across the country who provide this service to communities. And there is basically a template of questions that most communities ask, and then you add your own in on top of those. And the benefit of going through this template approach is that you can benchmark to other communities around perceptions of level of service and how you compare and stack up to other communities across the country that are similarly situated. It's very valuable information I have found in the past.
Can we see the questions beforehand?
Yes,
You can help
yes.
formulate them.
Yes.
Dave's trying to get to all of that.
So typically the way that this would work, I've engaged in it in the past in Vancouver is where I've had this experience. And in fact, Vancouver's out right now.
I've constructed poles before, so.
Right. So it's not really a poll per se, but you are asking opinions and perceptions and whether they would support this or that. So there's components of a poll, if you would. So the typical process is that you take a template and you kind of get a draft of that, and then you engage policymakers and others in shaping and refining from that starting point to make sure that there's comfort with the questions and that we're covering the unique and specific things that we want to know, and that we aren't asking superfluous questions or questions that we're not comfortable with. And then once that's the design, once the design is done and it's signed off, then it becomes pretty mechanical. They go out and they do the research, and they come back and they report the results and help us interpret those results. And then that's just one piece of information that's used as you make the difficult decisions among competing priorities. Sean and I, the mayor and I, chatted about how we would engage the council in that design process. And a thought that I had was to look at the leadership of our committees. And I know that we have, some committees have formal leadership. For example, public safety, I believe, is formally appointed a chair, and I believe Councilman Shoemaker is that chair. I'm not sure if all of the committees have done that formally, but would suggest a ad hoc committee, if you would, of 3 council members to work initially closely with me and the selected consultant in the initial shaping, and kind of get it through that level of filter, and then engage the full council at that point, trying to be as expedient as we can to move through that. It would be great to have the results reported to us by mid-July, and everyone I'm talking to says that that's possible, but we need to get moving. The deadline for a resolution to place an item on the November ballot is August 5th. Your last regularly scheduled meeting for that is your last meeting in July. So the idea would be by mid-July to be back with those results. That would really just be germane so far, based on the things that you've talked about, would be the renewal of the levy lid lift that you've talked about before. I believe almost proceeded to do last year, but decided to wait to give it consideration again this year based on how the budget was coming in. So there'll be lots of opportunities, to answer the question, to be involved. What I would envision is, with the general acknowledgement at this session now, to negotiate, get a price, get a package ready to go with one of the providers, so that at your next meeting and workshop, I would kind of present how they run, they do their process with their own thing, walk through that in much more specificity. You'd know who it was, know who the firm is, and then on consent, because that document would be for a PSA in the order of 13,000 or so. So it'd be for your action and consideration, and then we get started. So I know there was a lot of interest last time, pretty much direction. I felt direction that we need to do a community survey. So we jumped right on it. We'll be ready to have something for you in a couple weeks. Just wanted to give you that heads up. You've already appropriated funds for that. And so now we've reached that decision-making point about how to use those funds. And then the remainder, working with the grassroots efforts that's starting to happen about a possible downtown business association. We've had some conversations with them. They're meeting. We're very grateful for that effort. We want to help out. So potentially, don't know everything specifically about that yet, but using the remainder of the strategic planning money toward that goal of the councils around, helping the downtown. And then maybe some of our hotel motel might be able to come into play with that as well. So I don't have anything really specific on that piece. So if that makes sense, that's what I'm going to have ready for you. I'm working hard on that, and we'll continue over the next couple of weeks to have that for you next time.
Questions?
Sounds good.
And at that meeting, we can explore who might be that ad hoc group to work with myself and the consultant to start out before it comes to the, to the rest of the group.
Okay. Thank you. We're now at that point, the second opportunity in the agenda for any members of the public that would like to speak to council. Mike, anything new?
It's like speaking in favor of pickleball courts.
Okay,
Hope you approve it.
thank you. I've got nothing for you at this point. Anything from council? Okay, get a little bit longer lunch break. We'll be back here at 7 o'clock for regular session.